You've heard of oligarchs who answer to Putin, but what about the ones he can't touch? In this video, we reveal how Russia's richest billionaires outsmart sanctions, vanish from surveillance, and build private empires that rival nations. One man even controls a supply chain so vital that removing him could crash global food markets. Stay until the end to discover how he escaped Putin's grip and rewrote the rules of Russian power. You've heard of oligarchs who orbit Putin, men who build pipelines, buy football clubs, or parade billion-dollar yachts. But what about the ones Putin himself can't touch? Meet Dmitry Mazepin, not Russia's richest, not its flashiest, but maybe its most untouchable. They call him the phantom oligarch, because where others flaunt wealth, Mazepin vanishes into the shadows. He controls his empire through 40 offshore trusts, stitched across the British Virgin Islands, Cyprus, and the UAE. No palaces, no mega yachts, no football clubs, just invisibility. And what he controls is far more dangerous than yachts or oil. Fertilizer. Through Uralkim and Uralkali, Mazepin moves the nitrogen, potassium, and phosphate that feed farms from Brazil to Bangladesh. His reach touches 1 in 5 bags of fertilizer sold globally. That's not luxury, that's leverage. Because in a food crisis, fertilizer is louder than tanks. Analysts value his portfolio at above $10 billion, though you'll never see it in his name. Shell companies in Switzerland, holding firms in Hong Kong, layers upon layers of camouflage. And when sanctions came in 2022, he was briefly listed. Weeks later, exempted. Why? Because when one man can make wheat unaffordable in 6 countries, you don't sanction him, you negotiate with him. And Mazepin knew it. No Kremlin banquets, no public appearances. He doesn't need them. His empire isn't Russian, it's global. While others flex with headlines, he manipulates with harvests. He is the oligarch who never shows up because he's already there, wired invisibly into the global food chain. Some billionaires buy yachts. Andrei Melnichenko built a warship disguised as one. At first glance, his vessel sailing yacht. It looks like a floating sculpture, 468 feet of glass and steel, masts taller than Big Ben, and 8 towering decks. It cost over $500 million, making it the most expensive sailing yacht on Earth. But here's the truth. This isn't a toy. It's a fortress. The hull is embedded with military-grade radar scramblers, able to jam tracking systems. Its airspace is guarded by anti-drone defenses. Every critical room, control centers, navigation hubs, private suites is locked behind biometric fingerprint scanners. Even the glass is blast-resistant, and the paint itself is rumored to absorb radar. Tricks borrowed from defense contractors, not yacht builders. No casinos, no Instagram-ready hot tubs spilling over Monaco harbors. That was never the point. This ship was designed to disappear, to slip into international waters and vanish from satellites. And in 2022, when EU sanctions froze assets across Europe, that's exactly what it did. Sailing yacht, quietly cut communications and slipped out of port, gone before regulators could seize it. For weeks, no one knew where it was. Turkey, the Red Sea, no one could prove it. But the brilliance isn't just in the escape, it's in the design. Unlike palaces, unlike private jets, this yacht is mobile sovereignty, a floating command center equipped with encrypted satellites, intelligence rooms, and enough fuel to cross oceans without stopping. It wasn't built to flex for paparazzi. It was built to ensure that when governments freeze bank accounts, ground jets, and seize villas, Melnichenko sails beyond their reach. Because in the world of modern oligarchs, survival isn't about showing the world what you own. It's about building something that can't be taken because it can't be found. When sanctions struck Russian billionaires, most scrambled, selling assets, hiding yachts, moving money through emergency channels. Alexei Mordashov didn't scramble. He vanished, not by leaving Moscow, not by boarding a jet, but by erasing himself from paper, on spreadsheets, in court filings across 5 different jurisdictions. Mordashov disappeared, and with him went more than $29 billion in corporate control. At the center of his empire stood Severstal, one of Russia's largest steel producers, valued north of $15 billion. But Mordashov's reach stretched far wider: banking, tourism, logistics, and tech. He knew exposure was weakness, so he prepared. In the days before sanctions hit, Mordashov quietly transferred his shares in Nord Gold and Sever Group to relatives, offshore trusts, and obscure shell companies. Paperwork shifted to the British Virgin Islands, the Seychelles, Liechtenstein. The names changed, but the money didn't move. Control stayed exactly where it had always been, with him just one layer deeper. Headlines screamed that Mordashov was losing everything, but inside his vault of legal smokescreens, the empire was untouched. A holding company dissolved here. A Cayman entity formed there. By the time investigators mapped his old network, he had already built a new one. This wasn't evasion. It was choreography. Designed liquidations, timed filings, illusions of collapse. While regulators thought they had cornered him, they were chasing shadows. The empire never left. It simply reappeared behind a thicker fog. And that's the genius. Unlike other oligarchs who flaunt palaces and yachts, Mordashov built smoke thick enough to hide $29 billion in plain sight. When the air clears, the empire will still be there, only harder to find and even harder to touch. Most oligarchs build fortresses out of concrete, pipelines, or ships. Vladimir Lysin built his out of encrypted data. His fortune, valued at over $23 billion, is forged in steel. Through NLMK, Novolipetsk Steel, he runs one of Russia's largest producers, supplying everything from high-grade sheets for skyscrapers to specialty alloys that quietly flow into Russia's defense sector. But steel is only the surface. The genius lies in how he hides it. Every layer of Lysin's empire is reinforced with digital armor. His logistics hubs operate inside Faraday-shielded control rooms, blocking wireless signals, preventing remote breaches. His divisions communicate through air-gapped networks, physically cut off from the internet, the kind of architecture usually reserved for nuclear plants and intelligence agencies. Contracts and shipping manifests, routed through blockchain ledgers detached from Russian databases. Data packets are encrypted, triple authenticated, and then bounce through satellite uplinks in Switzerland before hitting clients in Asia or Europe. It's not just cybersecurity, it's industrial cloaking. While other oligarchs rely on private armies, Lysin deploys cryptographers and ex-intelligence officers to make his empire invisible. Not defended, not hidden, disappeared. And it works. When sanctions froze assets and grounded private jets, Lysin's operations kept moving. On paper, his supply chain looks like a decentralized web of trading firms across Austria, Belgium, the UAE, and Singapore. Some clients didn't even realize their shipments traced back to Russian steel. But make no mistake, they did, and they still do. Because Lysin understands something most billionaires don't. In today's world, the strongest fortress isn't made of stone or steel. It's made of servers, air gaps, and firewalls. That's how you turn a $23 billion steel empire into something more powerful than tanks. A ghost network coded in silence. Igor Sechin doesn't smile for the cameras. He doesn't need to. For nearly 2 decades, he has been the most feared man in Russian business, second only to Vladimir Putin in both power and paranoia. As CEO of Rosneft, Russia's largest state oil company valued above $75 billion, Sechin doesn't just oversee energy. He controls the bloodstream of Russia's economy. But Rosneft is only the surface. Sechin's real empire is influence. He commands the loyalty of former intelligence officers, elite security units, and political operatives spread across ministries and embassies. His boardroom isn't a conference table, it's an encrypted briefing room in a basement, midnight jet to Caracas, Riyadh, or Beijing. Under his leadership, Rosneft didn't just drill oil, it reshaped geopolitics. He brokered a $400 billion pipeline deal with China, locked down Arctic drilling rights, and kept Venezuela's regime alive with lifelines of Russian crude. But power like this leaves a trace, the kind of trace sanctions love to follow. In 2022, Sechin became one of the first oligarchs targeted by the West. His overseas assets froze. His name turned toxic in boardrooms from Geneva to Singapore. And unlike Mazepin or Mordashov, Sechin isn't invisible. He's too close, too visible, too known. Insiders call him Russia's Darth Vader, not for theatrics, but accuracy. He built his throne grown out of pipelines, contracts, and secrecy. But today, cracks are showing. Internal leaks from Rosneft, rumors of disputes with Kremlin advisors, and the growing weight of sanctions is eroding his reach. For years, Sechin's fortress seemed unbreakable, but proximity to Putin is both armor and exposure, and as Putin's circle shrinks under pressure, Sechin stands in the open, carrying the weight of a throne that suddenly looks fragile. Because when your empire depends on state contracts and geopolitical shadows, losing deniability is as dangerous as losing oil. Roman Abramovich was once the poster child of the modern oligarch, owner of Chelsea Football Club, collector of mansions, jets, and billion-dollar art, the rare Russian billionaire who blended raw wealth with Western respectability. At his peak, his fortune soared past $14 billion, woven into steel, real estate, and a $700 million super yacht called Eclipse. He wasn't just surviving post-Soviet capitalism, he was mastering it. But that version of Abramovich no longer exists. In 2022, during back-channel peace talks between Russia and Ukraine, Abramovich reportedly suffered symptoms of poisoning. The incident wasn't fatal, but it was transformative. Something snapped. The oligarch who once sought headlines suddenly began vanishing, not physically, but strategically. The sale of Chelsea FC wasn't just a business deal, it was an exodus. For $5.25 billion, Abramovich offloaded the crown jewel of his public persona, pledging the proceeds to humanitarian causes, a gesture that doubled as reputation armor. Behind the scenes, assets scattered like smoke. Eclipse disappeared from the radar. Villas in London, St. Bart's, and the Côte d'Azur quietly shifted to relatives and foundations. His Gulfstream jet began flying erratic routes, re-registered under shell companies that regulators could never quite pin down. And then came the rumors. Abramovich, the man once tied to Putin, was now whispered to hold a Ukrainian passport, a fact neither confirmed nor denied, a move that placed him in a legal gray zone where no government could fully touch him. Today, Abramovich exists in a space most oligarchs fear to enter, between diplomacy and disappearance. When sanctions froze assets and revoked visas, most thought Russian billionaires would panic. They didn't, because their true home wasn't Moscow. It was already built inside offshore trusts, holding firms and routing numbers. Before governments ever reached their yachts or villas, the wealth was gone, moved into four-layer ownership webs across Liechtenstein, Cyprus, Singapore, and the Cayman Islands. A $300 million asset might technically belong to 5 companies in 5 countries. That's not secrecy, that's architecture. Mazepin wired himself into the food chain. Melnichenko built a militarized yacht designed to vanish. Mordashov perfected the art of corporate disappearance. Lysin cloaked his steel empire in encrypted code. Sechin ruled oil like an empire, only to feel his throne crack under exposure. Abramovich reinvented himself after poison, becoming volatility itself. Together, they've created something more powerful than yachts or palaces. A floating empire stitched between borders. An invisible nation with no capital city, no flag, no borders. If this opened your eyes to how power really hides in plain sight, hit like, subscribe to Luxrish, and ring the bell. Because the most dangerous empires aren't the ones you see, they're the ones you'll never find.